And now we can get started.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Barbara Edmond, and on behalf of the Maine Association of Nonprofits and the Maine Philanthropy Center, I want to welcome you all to today's nonprofit and philanthropic conversation with gubernatorial candidate Alan Caron. We're very excited to offer you this opportunity to hear the candidate's views on issues impacting the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors. In addition to Mr. Caron today, we have offered a similar webinar format to Terry Hayes, Janet Mills, and Sean Moody at a time of their convenience. We will share more about those dates at the end of the program. All the candidates will have the opportunity to respond to the same set of questions as developed by our 29-member Forum Steering Committee. That steering committee reflects the broad diversity and depth of Maine's nonprofit and philanthropic sectors. And we can't thank these folks enough for all investing a significant amount of time to help organize and prepare the questions that we will pose across all our webinars. Before we begin, I'd like to provide a little background and explain why we are offering these gubernatorial candidate webinars. The answer is simple. It's because Maine's nonprofit and philanthropic sectors matter and are critically important to Maine's economy and quality of life. So of course, we are eager to work with the next governor of our great state to assure a path to future prosperity and growth for all. Maine nonprofits stimulate the economy, build community, weave our social safety net, and foster civic engagement. While 75% of Maine's nonprofits are small, with annual revenues under $100,000, they employ 1 in 6 Maine workers. Additionally, Maine nonprofits contribute approximately $11 billion each year to Maine's economy through wages paid, retail and wholesale purchases, and professional service contracts. This group of vibrant nonprofit organizations invest significant financial and organizational resources in their communities and mobilizes over 345,000 volunteers annually. It's estimated that these volunteers donate almost $935 million in time and resources to their community. Nonprofits provide important services such as job training, housing, mental health services, transportation, conservation, and other enrichment opportunities. And they can also foster innovation, community engagement, and entrepreneurship. The grant makers in Maine are also bringing an important voice to the table and have a unique perspective to offer. This group includes private and public foundations, public charities, United Ways, corporate funders, and generous individuals. In 2016, charitable giving in Maine totaled an estimated $776 million. Funders play an integral role in strengthening Maine's communities through grant making, capacity building initiatives, data collection, evaluation, and mission investing. And the ultimate aim of this philanthropy is always to make Maine a better place for all to live, work, and play. The complex issues that currently impact and threaten our quality of life require multiple dimensional solutions and many partners. It takes government, philanthropy, nonprofits, and businesses all partnering to get the work done and achieve this mission sooner and better. We hope that whoever wins this election will see the value in welcoming our community as vital partners in moving Maine forward. So thank you, Alan, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to speak with our community today.
I'm delighted to be part of this conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
That's great. And so now just a few process points before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for future viewing and listening. All phone lines are muted with the exception of the candidate Jennifer Gray and myself. We are unable to take participant questions. At the end of the webinar, a short evaluation will pop up on your screen, and we appreciate if you'll take a couple moments to provide your feedback. To make this webinar format as fair as possible, we are sharing the questions with the candidates ahead of time, and the candidates will all be asked the same questions. The webinar is divided into 4 segments. To start, Alan will have 2 minutes to tell us about his history working with nonprofits and how these experiences will help shape his approach to public policy. Then we will move to 11 long questions and answers. Alan will have 90 seconds to answer each question. Next is the rapid fire round, where Alan will have 15 seconds to answer a quick series of questions. And lastly, Alan will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. So to get started, I'd like to introduce Jen Burns-Gray. Jen very capably splits her time as both the Maine Association of Nonprofits Director of Advocacy and Public Relations and the Director of Advocacy for the Maine Philanthropy Center. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you, Barbara, and welcome, Alan. Alan, please take Alan. Please take 2 minutes to tell us about your history working with nonprofits and how these experiences will help shape your approach to public policy. I will let you know when you have 30 seconds left and when time is up. Let's start.
Well, thank you both for doing this webinar, and I appreciate the opportunity. I probably have been more involved in the nonprofit community than any candidate in recent history, and perhaps in my lifetime. I think I may be the only governor who actually comes out of the nonprofit sector in many ways. I've been working with and creating nonprofits for most of my adult life, going back to becoming the president of the Munjoy Hill Neighborhood Organization in 1980 or so, and creating groups like the Waterfront Alliance in Portland. Some people may know I also did a long series of referendum campaigns which built coalitions and brought groups into being for a short-term purpose. I think over the last 15 or 20 years I've devoted myself primarily first to creating a group called Grow Smart Maine in 2003, and then another group, Envision Maine, in 2006. So I have been involved in or run or advised nonprofits across the political spectrum for many, many years. While I was doing all that, of course, I was also running a business with my left hand so I could keep myself going, and that's given me opportunities as well. So I understand how vital the nonprofit sector is. I've been a member of this organization through the years, for many years, off and on, and I'm delighted to be helpful. I will be a governor who gets it and who comes out of this work and will ensure that you're involved in everything that has to be done in Maine.
Thank you. Let's turn to the long questions and answers, and you'll have 90 seconds to respond, and I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. Under your administration, do you intend to engage the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors in the development of policy and or the implementation of government programs?
Absolutely, and without question. If you look at how I've operated, let's take the most recent example with Envision Maine. I did a series of big gatherings around the state, focusing on the key issues shaping Maine's future and engaging people in conversations and dialogue in a respectful way, encouraging people to listen to each other, to learn from each other, to build relationships and affection. In every one of those events, I had between 25 and 30 nonprofit partners, ranging from chambers of commerce to advocacy groups to environmental organizations. That is the way that I like to operate. I like to get people together. I like to hear and understand where the common ground is between those organizations. I like them to find that common ground and practical things that we can actually get done. Oh, did I run up against my 90 seconds?
No, you're great. Philanthropy plays a unique role, innovating role in being able to experiment and take risks that government and nonprofits can't. Philanthropic funding supports the development, incubation, and testing of new ideas as well as pilot programs, discrete programs, and advocacy and thought partnerships. On what issue would your administration want to partner with Maine's philanthropic community, and why?
Well, I'm most interested in partnering in two areas. One I've been involved in for a long time, which is land conservation. But even more important than that is the development of Maine's next economy. I co-authored a book a few years ago called Maine's Next Economy. I have been an advocate for innovation, for entrepreneurship, for startups, for creativity in the Maine economy. I think we must pivot from the old economy to the new one. I have partnered with the philanthropic community since I brought the Brookings Institution to Maine in 2006. I think the philanthropic community has played a critical, vital, catalytic role, and I hope that will continue. If I'm governor, we will have a very strong partnership, particularly on those two issues.
Thank you. The state of Maine faces a workforce challenge. Do you see a role the nonprofit sector can play in helping to attract and retain a workforce, and how would you address that? For example, in other states, the creative sector has been an important component to attracting young talent.
Well, I think there's a role for everyone to play. I think the government has to step up, obviously. We have made a tragic mistake in this state over the last 30 or 40 years of taking skill training out of our high schools and making it much more difficult for people who don't have enough money to get the skills they need. And we're seeing the results of that skills gap now. When I was a kid, in high school, I had 40 friends in our neighborhood. Not one of them went to college. But many of them are very successful, and they're successful because in high school, for free, they could get skills and training. We thought that somewhere along the line we got the idea that that wasn't valuable, that everyone had to aspire to go into college, and a lot of those programs got shut down in high schools, and now that forced people to have to go to a community college or tech training to get the skills they need. I think we have to go back a little bit on that one. I think we have to reintroduce skill training. We have to revalue it. And I will be very aggressive in doing that. I think we'll all do that together. This is something we have to go all in on.
Is there a role for the refugee and immigrant population in Maine's workforce? What steps would you take to advance this role?
Well, I like to tell the story of my grandfather coming over the mountains from Quebec 100 years ago with a horse and buggy and settling in and around Waterville for a job at the mills. And I have written extensively. Your listeners may know that I used to write a weekly column for the Sunday Telegram and the Augusta and Waterville papers, and I have written extensively on this issue. We cannot succeed as a state without welcoming people from across the country and across the world, and we have to do that without regard to whether their skin color is different or their hair color is different or they worship to a different god or they speak a different first language. Maine must, at long last, let go of the fear we have of people from away. And one of the first things I'm going to do is erect a big sign at the border that says, "You are welcome here." And we're going to end. The greatest thing a governor can do is help people to learn and to move forward. And I will be a champion for bringing more people to Maine in any way we can do it.
When do you think it's appropriate, if at all, for the legislature and governor to alter a policy that was adopted at referendum?
Almost never. Now, I think the legislature has a responsibility to ensure that issues adopted by the voters are legal and that they're properly worded. I have been horrified by what has happened over the last 8 years around this willful ignoring of what Maine people have said in bond issues and in referendums. I used to run some campaigns a while back, and it was always considered to be the third rail of politics for a legislature or a governor to overturn or ignore the will of the voters. We've now, thanks to the current governor and this legislature, we've made that the norm, as though the votes and the voices of Maine people are simply advisory. And if you don't like what the conclusion was, you just go ahead and do your own thing.
30 seconds.
This must stop. And I will, look, if you're a governor and you disagree with a referendum, go out there and make your case. And if you lose the argument and the voters do not agree with you, your job as governor, your oath as governor, is to execute the laws of the land, and that's what you must do.
Maine ranks high among the states with the least affordable housing. According to a study by the National Low Income Housing Coalition, a Maine renter would have to earn $18.73 an hour to be able to afford a typical two-bedroom apartment. But the average wage for a Maine renter is $11.44 an hour. Is there anything the government should be doing to help the average Maine worker and retiree facing similar challenges be able to afford appropriate housing?
Yeah, well, of course, those numbers are probably average around the state, and the problem is different in different areas. In some areas, we have too much housing stock because population has been declining. Other areas, we have not enough. I think there are a couple of things the state government can do, and I think it's then incumbent on local governments to do more. The state government can focus on building a new prosperity and a new economy in Maine, and not repeating the same things we've been doing for decades. State government could also support a decent minimum wage indexed to inflation, which Maine voters have again spoken about. That will help bring the incomes up, those two things. Now, the bigger problem in some ways is at the local level. And I've been very much involved. I was chairman of my planning board, and I, as I said, helped to create Grow Smart Maine, which worked on a lot of planning issues. We have had a tendency at the town level to impose restrictions on housing as though we want suburban housing planted in a city. That has cost the erosion of housing. New housing is much more difficult to build, and with restricted housing, costs go up. So we've got to continue to attack that issue at the local level.
Maine's Child Protective Services Agency receives 55,000 calls a year. The state used to have 24,000 children served by TANF, yet that has dropped to 7,000 a year despite a rise in children living in poverty. What can state government do to ensure kids are not falling through the cracks and are able to thrive in Maine?
Yeah, look, I grew up in poverty, in a broken family, racked by alcohol. I was a kid who walked to school by myself before I was 5. I really had to make my way. And so I am extremely interested in what's happening, particularly to low-income kids who don't have the same opportunities, don't have the same support, and must be protected and helped along the way. I think part of the problem we have in Maine, and the voters have to think about this, we have elected, and most recently, a governor who hates government, and we've asked him to run it. And the predictable outcome has been this haphazard sledgehammer approach to cutting things, more things dealing with children and welfare than anything else. I think that we're now seeing the consequences of that behavior, of not thinking through what we were doing, of not prioritizing programs, and the ones who have suffered are not the politicians, it's the kids. So I think we have to do everything we can, and I'm committed to making government as effective and efficient as we can. But we cannot take these sledgehammers to government. And so what can we do? We can first focus on building the economy, and second, not cut programs that are necessary.
Our public health system is facing some serious challenges. For example, our youth smoking rate has risen above the national average. We also have a growing opioid crisis, and nearly 20% of Maine's children are food insecure. Do you have plans for strengthening Maine's public health system?
Well, I think the larger problem here is that we have a federal government, the United States Congress, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the health industry. And that has caused a lot of problems. And I'm old enough to remember, for instance, when you couldn't advertise medications on TV. Now we have people streaming to doctors asking for the blue pill or the pink pill. So that is a kind of a background to the problems we're confronting, and we have to deal with these things at the state and local level. The opioid crisis in particular is a serious crisis. I've lost a dear nephew to it, as I've lost one to murder and one to suicide. So there's a lot of anxiety out there. Again, it goes back to an economy that provides opportunity for people. If people do not have opportunity, they have hopelessness. And when they have those things, they're more inclined to be self-destructive. On this, the particulars of the issue, every problem we can cite requires more money. The problem is we don't have more money as an aging state with a flat economy. So we have to find ways to grow this economy and increase revenues to state government. Otherwise, as I'm seeing in this campaign over and over again, we're simply making promises to every group we talk with no way to fulfill those promises. I don't want to do that. I understand these are important issues. I'll work as hard as I can on them. But first, I have to work on the economy.
Often multiple state agencies are tasked with addressing the same problem. The opioid crisis is one example, but there are many more. In these instances, how will you ensure different parts of your administration work together to meet the common agenda, or the common challenge?
Yeah. Look, I've co-authored a book in 2010 called Reinventing Maine Government that got at this issue. First, it compared Maine to other states around the country, and it found that we spend more and we don't necessarily get better results. So we have a lot of problems in state government with its organization, with the number of management layers in government, and we've got to go to work on that. I'm going to try to bring people together across the spectrum, those who love government, those who don't, and see if we can work together over a 4 or 8 year period to fix the fundamental structural problems of government, and this is one aspect of it that you're referencing here. Let me go back to the opioid crisis for a moment to point out one thing. The United States Senate just voted on a new major opioid program. It's going to help everybody. That vote was 99-1.
30 seconds.
The United States Senate can't vote 99-1 on the time of day, but they did it on this crisis. Meanwhile, in the state of Maine, we have lost countless months and years arguing over partisan positions, who wants more enforcement, who wants more programs. We have to have a governor and government that brings people together around common sense strategies and gets things done.
Many nonprofits provide services to the state through contracts. These contracts require the state to set rates. In order for these nonprofits to attract a quality workforce, the rates have to keep pace with inflation. Do you agree? And if so, how would you do it?
I do agree. And I think when you don't do that, you're implicitly trying to push nonprofits out of the delivery system. I think that's a mistake. I like to get the delivery of services as close to the ground as possible. This is true about my general philosophy of state government. I'd rather have state government get smaller and regional and local governments have more to do. And so I've talked about increasing the amount that state pays to schools, the revenue sharing. I would like to decentralize government somewhat. And working with nonprofits for service delivery in particular is one way to decentralize, get things closer to the ground. I think the quality of understanding is better there. And look, we just have to pay what's required to get quality people in our workplaces, whether they're nonprofits or the state government itself.
30 seconds. One of the most important responsibilities as governor is to propose a state budget. Please share with us what would be your approach to the budget writing process and describe your top budget priorities.
Well, my approach generally, as I suggested before, is to get a lot of really smart people together and understand how other people see the priorities of the state. Mine are quite clear, and you can get them all, by the way, on my website at caronforgovernor.com. First priority is to invest in an innovation economy and research and development and helping small entrepreneurs and startups. So, I have an elaborate plan on that. Second one is to make government work better. The third one for me is around education and helping education to become more practical. I've touched on that earlier. And the fourth is around energy. I want to commit Maine to a 30-year plan for energy independence with solar as the driving force, the disruptive technology, and offshore wind the second. All of that recognizes that we must meet our fundamental needs for infrastructure and our human needs. So those things are not negotiable. They have to be done. And I'll say again that the way our needs are growing, but our revenues aren't. So I don't believe we can tax ourselves any further. So that means we have to grow the economy to produce more revenues to meet our needs. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in a continuing declining circle, and I don't like where that brings us. We're on to the rapid fire questions.
Let's do the rapid fire. You have 15 seconds to answer each question. I'll let you know when your time is up.
Okay.
Nonprofits enjoy property tax exemptions for the work they do. Do you support the exemption?
I support the exemptions for the overwhelming majority of nonprofits, but I want to take a hard look at those nonprofits who are paying among the highest wages in the state of Maine and find out why they can't do more. Oh, yeah, we're in 15 seconds, sorry.
Yes, 15 seconds. The last time voters approved a bond for the Land for Maine's Future program was in 2012. Would you support a significant bond to fund the Land for Maine's Future program?
Yes.
Do you support a universal public preschool program in Maine?
I do, if we can find the resources to do it.
Will you implement the voter-approved Medicaid expansion?
When the federal government offers to put $9 on the table, if we put $1, it's not a hard decision. I would have done that in a minute.
Restorative justice programs in Maine provide the opportunity for youth offenders to engage in community and peer-driven process to rehabilitate and have demonstrated success. Would your administration support restorative justice opportunities for youth offenders?
It should be our first alternative. Absolutely.
What would be your top action item around the opioid crisis?
Bring people together. Let's get beyond the partisan stuff, and let's go to work. And as I said, the federal program will help. What more can we do at the state level? We know we need more money there.
Maine has many public parks and state lands that don't comply with the law regarding providing access to people with disabilities. Would you support increasing funding to address this challenge?
Yes.
We know that only half of people that need mental health services receive them, and only 1 in 10 people who need substance use disorder treatment actually receive it. Do you think that the state has a responsibility to ensure access to behavioral health services for those that need it?
I believe the state has an opportunity, a responsibility. I'm not sure it has the resources. So again, we're going to have to work together to find out where resources come from.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you rank climate change as a matter of importance for the state government to address, with a 1 being not at all important and a 10 being critically important that the state invest significant resources in addressing the issue?
Well, it's certainly in the top 5. I don't think you can imagine a new economy and new prosperity in Maine and ignore climate change. This is not a scientific debate any longer. It's simply a political and partisan debate.
Maine has the third highest percentage of veterans in the nation. We can end veteran homelessness in Maine, but our state needs leadership from the top and to take a comprehensive approach. What will you do to honor and take care of veterans and their families who are homeless in Maine?
Well, I've been meeting with a lot of veterans and touring veteran homes, and it's rather shocking to me that we call upon these people to serve and then we forget them so quickly. All I can say is I will do everything I can possibly do to correct that situation.
Many agree that immigrants bring tremendous value to Maine, including diversity of perspective and experiences, increased vibrancy to Maine's culture, and added economic strength. What would be your first action as governor to make Maine a welcoming place for immigrants to work, start businesses, and make their homes?
I want us to erect a big sign at the border that says you are welcome here. I then want us to get behind the creation of a welcoming center, both for immigrants from around the country and immigrants from around the world, so that everyone has a friendly door to go through.
Okay, and now, Alan, you have 2 minutes to give a closing statement, and I will again let you know when you have 30 seconds left and when your time is up.
Okay. I come from a family of mill workers and farmers. They're the two hardest hit sectors of the economy. I come from poverty. I saw my parents' generation lift themselves into the middle class. Their grandchildren now work at Walmart and nursing homes. We must do more to help the folks who have been left behind, not just those who need programs, but those who need jobs and hope and opportunity. That's why I've focused on the economy in everything I do. And I think Maine has tremendous opportunities to grow an innovation-driven economy, to make ourselves famous not just for where we are and the kind of people we are, but for what we build and what we make and what we send to the world. That's what I want to do as governor, and I hope I'll have your support to do it.
Alan, thank you so much for participating today and so for candidly sharing your views with all of us.
Well, my pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great. We also want to thank our listening audience for your attendance and remind you that we'll be sharing a link of the recording of today's program with all the participants and then also across the nonprofit and philanthropic networks.
Great.
As promised at the beginning of our hour, we are delighted to share the schedule for the other upcoming gubernatorial candidate webinars. Please join us on Thursday, October 4th at 2:30 p.m. for a conversation with Terry Hayes, and then hear from Janet Mills on Tuesday, October 9th at 2 p.m. Sean Moody has declined our invitation to participate. By registering for today's program, you are automatically registered for the two upcoming forums, so please make sure that you have marked these dates on your calendars as well. Again, our sincere thanks to everyone. Alan, again, thank you so much. And we would ask all the participants to please now take a few minutes to complete the evaluation that is popping up on your screen. We greatly appreciate your feedback. And with that, this concludes today's program, and we wish you all a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.